Pessimism is a luxury a Jew could never allow himself. When Abraham, the first Jew, despaired, God took him outside and said to him, "Gaze now towards the heavens and count the stars." That is the Jewish response to despair. To look beyond the here and now, and to be conscious of the world, not as it is, but as it should be. It is our mandate to be the nation who brings light when it is dark. When we were putting together this tekes, we decided to focus on stories of South Africans and their affinity to the state of Israel. I now call on representatives from the youth movements and schools to come forward to tell these stories of our fallen.
Good evening, all. Yehezekiel Berlovitz by Peter Bailey. Yehezekiel Chetzi Berlovitz was born in Johannesburg on the 4th of April, 1918, to a religious family. The son of Fagel and Nathan Berlovitz, Chetzi was the oldest of 8 children, 2 girls and 6 boys. In 1944, Chetzi made Aliyah, where he joined Kivutzat, Avram, and Gush Etzon. During April of 1948, while Chetzi was undergoing agricultural training at Kibbutz Ein Chanatziv, a religious kibbutz in the Jordan Valley, he was asked to return to South Africa as a shaliach, where he could continue his agricultural studies. Chetzi moved back to Kivutzat Avram to prepare for his journey to South Africa. Arab irregular forces started attacking the settlement shortly after his return, and Chetzi decided to postpone his departure to participate in the defense of the besieged village. During this period, Chetzi described the village as the lone island in the raging Arab Sea. But he had the faith that no force could move the defenders from the position. There can be no withdrawal from here after Jewish settlements have already twice been destroyed in Gush Etzon, he said. Yehezekiel Berlovitz never witnessed the fall of Gush Etzon, as he was killed by an Arab bullet on the night of the 11th of April, 1948. He was buried as a hero in the Mount Herzl Military Cemetery.
Flying Officer Lionel Blach by Peter Bailey. Lionel Morris Blach, also known as Leslie, was born in Potchefstroom on the 30th of November, 1921. He attended university where he qualified as a chemical engineer. With the Second World War raging, he joined the South African Air Force on the day he graduated as an engineer. After active service with the Air Force in North Africa and Italy, he returned to his civilian life in South Africa. During the War of Independence in Israel, however, he decided to make Aliyah so that he could participate in the defense of the newly born State of Israel. He joined the Israeli Air Force with the rank of flying officer and proceeded to fly combat missions. On the 27th of August 1948, during Operation Brush to destroy the Syrian bridgehead at Mishmar HaYarden in the Upper Galilee, his aircraft was shot down in battle. His body was not recovered, and he was declared missing in action. Unbeknown to the Israeli authorities, Leslie Blach had been buried in Syria in the Jewish cemetery in Damascus. In October 1949, his body was exhumed, returned by the Syrians. The Syrians never gave proper information with regard to the identity of the body, which they had returned to Israel. The recovered body was buried on the 9th of October 1949 in the Nachlat Yitzchak military cemetery near Tel Aviv, in a grave marked unknown soldier. The late Bernie Blach never gave up searching for his brother's body, and almost 46 years later, it was established that the unknown soldier was in fact Leslie. A tombstone in his memory was unveiled on the 22nd of July, 1994. The President of Israel, Major General Ezer Weizmann, who had been a fellow pilot in 101 Squadron, delivered a moving eulogy. Present at the ceremony were several former South Africans, including Smokey Salmon, now 98 years old, the late Dr. Sid Cohen, and the late Boris Sr., who, like Les Blach, had all volunteered to serve with the Israeli Air Force during the War of Independence. Their contributions to the Jewish state will never be forgotten.
Neil Fried and Dudi Silbowitz by Daniel Barnett. Neil Fried was born in Johannesburg on the 13th of April, 1948. Dudi Silbowitz was born in Cape Town on the 12th of December, 1949. Both became much-loved leaders of Ichud Habonim, the predecessors to Habonim Dror, and both made Aliyah to Israel in the early 70s, where they settled on Kibbutz Yisrael in the same Habonim Garin. Upon joining the IDF, the two friends both joined the tank unit of the Nachal Brigade, traditionally an infantry unit for new immigrants. Both Chevra appreciated that the army was an integral part of the absorption process and learned to speak excellent Hebrew. Within their unit, they were renowned as well-liked, dedicated, and talented soldiers. In September 1973, only 2 months after they had left the army, the Yom Kippur War broke out. Recalled to their tank unit, Neil drove the machine while Dudi manned the artillery. During the war, both men fought in the Sinai Peninsula and eventually crossed the Suez Canal into Egypt, where they were deployed to the Abu Sultan area. On the 22nd of Tishrei, 18th of October 1973, their unit was ambushed by Egyptian forces. The tank that both men were in received a direct hit from the west, but continued to move forward ablaze. A sitting target. The tank took a second hit before blowing up. None of the crew survived. 3 days before their death, Aryeh Gordon, an American-born Israeli reservist, met Neil and Dudi and recalled later what happened. I spent half an hour with Dudi and Neil. What caught my eye, indeed what caught my ear, to be precise, was the South African accent of their Hebrew. Where were they from? Israel? And before that, South Africa. The scene was relaxed. The tanks and the men at rest. Their own tank provided shade as we sat and talked. The most important thing I did was distribute postcards and pencils. If they would write out a message then and there, I could mail out a postcard that evening. I recall the silence as they wrote. Obviously, all their thoughts and a whole world of emotions went into the forming of words, which are so inadequate at such moments. One of the boys held a pencil for some time before beginning to write. Although I was anxious to move on, I recall keeping back any indication of impatience. At least in writing their postcards, they should not be rushed. It was on the 15th of October that they wrote their last words.
Neil Fried and Dudi Silbowitz by Daniel Barnett continued. Aryeh Gordon went on. For the rest of the war and after, I often thought of them and wondered if they had made it through. Months later, while lecturing to soldiers at Telcha, a young man came up to me after I had finished. He spoke Hebrew in a South African accent, and he was a tankist. Was he by chance from Israel? I asked. Did he perhaps know anything about the two young men? I remember desperately trying to control my voice as I asked, were they all right? Had they made it? The man was named Jules and was a friend of Neil and Dodi. He told me that they had not made it.
At times like that, there are the conventional words of condolences which we can offer. But to the loved ones of Neil and Dodi, perhaps you will find some small measure of consolation in this, that someone who knew and talked with them once for a moment, fastened onto that moment, hoped with all his might for their well-being, felt the shock and hurt of the terrible news, and mourns them. Neil, posthumously marked corporal, and Dodi were both buried on their beloved kibbutz Yisrael, where a memorial to them exists today. David was 24, Neil 25. They, just like many of us, were compassionate, loving young chevre, trying to make a small bit of a difference in a world where difference is challenging.
Every year on the anniversary of their death, former members of Habonim from across Israel gather at Kibbutz Israel to pay their respects to the departed friends. A friend said after one of these memorials, "This project of remembering Neil and Dodi is not just alive, but it is generated from a common, unextinguished flame." Looking back over the years, I can recall times when we could talk with optimism, where brave deeds by great leaders seemingly gave hope for a better future, where it seemed that after centuries of strife, swords could finally be beaten into microchips, and that this troubled corner of the world could finally take its peaceful place in the family of nations.
In 1993, on the 20th anniversary of their death, a reference library and reading room named for Neil and Dodi was opened on Kibbutz Yisrael. This facility became an integral resource for Olim from Russia and other parts of the world who visited the kibbutz as part of their ulpan. As Neil's sister said at the opening of the library, "I know in my heart that this reading room would have been just what they had wished for." As Neil and Dodi would have said, "Aleh uvneh, let us build."
This is the story of Sylvia Bernstein and Gail Balkin. Purim 1996 is remembered by many as a time of mourning rather than a time of traditional celebrations with fancy dress and parties. That's because in the run-up to the Festival of Lights that year, no less than 60 people were killed in terror attacks in Israel. Nevertheless, on Erev Purim 1996, despite the heightened threat, the streets outside Dizengoff Center in Tel Aviv were bustling. Among the crowd that evening were 3 generations of former South Africans: grandmother Sylvia Bernstein, mother Gail Balkin, and daughter Lauren Balkin. Lauren was getting married in 2 weeks and had to visit her dressmaker for a fitting. The close-knit family group were excited for the upcoming Simcha and chatted happily about all the things they still had to arrange. Then Lauren went off for her fitting, leaving her mother and grandmother to dawdle along behind. Without warning, there was an explosion, sudden and huge. A suicide bomber had detonated a 20-kilogram bomb packed with nails and bits of steel at the corner of Dizengoff and King George Streets. The results were horrendous. 13 people were killed and 130 wounded. Among the dead were Sylvia Bernstein and her daughter Gail Balkin. Lauren had lost her mother and grandmother 2 weeks before her wedding. Sylvia's surviving children, 2 of whom live in Israel and 1 in Australia, struggled to cope with the aftermath of the heinous act of terrorism, as did all of her grandchildren. Recently, a memorial board was unveiled at the Telfed offices in Ra'anana to honor the South African victims of terror in Israel. The gathering was addressed by Marilyn Butchins, daughter of Sylvia and sister of Gail. Gail's second husband, now widowed, was also in attendance. He had returned to the United States after the attack, as he was unable to bear the trauma of continuing his life in Israel. The story of the late Sylvia and Gail, innocent victims of terror, reminds us that beyond the cool, hard facts of every attack are real people, real lives, cut short with terrible and eternal repercussions for those who survive. May their memories and the memories of all who have fallen in the name of Israel be a blessing for the ages.
Here are a few words by Gabi from Johannesburg. From a very young age, I remember attending the Yom Ha'atzmaut celebrations together with my father, singing Am Yisrael Chai, hand in hand, and rejoicing because we understood just how powerful it is that we, the Jewish people, have a homeland to call our own. However, I also remember attending the Yom Hazikaron ceremonies with tears in my eyes, knowing that each year our very own brothers and sisters are sacrificing their lives for the continuation and protection of our beloved Israel. I was privileged enough to spend a gap year with B'nai Akiva in Israel, and from my year's experiences, I gained an unequivocal love for the country and its people, and was able to truly see firsthand just how lucky we are to live in a time where we have our own Jewish country, Israel, something our grandparents and great-grandparents could only dream of some 70 years ago. At a mere 9 years old, Nissim Ginizel realized his purpose for Am Yisrael. He fought bravely in the War of Independence, specifically in the Battle of the Old City, and after serving as a scout for the IDF soldiers and delivering food and ammunition between the posts, Nissim sadly passed away on May 28, 1948, after being shot by a sniper. He was later recognized as the youngest IDF soldier for his heroic efforts that ultimately led to his death. So after my year away, I returned to South Africa to begin my studies at university, but something just didn't sit right with me from the very beginning. I knew deep inside that my journey can only continue in Israel. I knew that I needed to put my studies and my life on hold and be like Nissim, be part of Am Yisrael, part of the bigger picture. From that moment, I began my process of Aliyah. Just as Nissim was able to realize what he had given to himself, putting his brother, sister, and family aside for a moment and devoting his entire self towards the greater good, so too I stand today as a proud IDF soldier and am honored to be part of the continuous legacy that keeps our nation united and protected.
I Remember by Aaron Chazen. I remember the day like it was yesterday, the 25th of October, 2013. Sleeping in forests near Jerusalem with my closest friends, enjoying the fresh air and calm silence on a camp Makor Chaim students had organized. I remember waking up and getting put in breakfast groups with the Israelis. I remember the faces of the Israeli boys as we ate our box of kariot. I remember how peaceful it was. I also remember the 12th of June, 2014. My mom is crying, watching the TV as CNN flashes images of the 3 kidnapped boys. 3 boys my age, Eyal, Gilad, and Naftali. Then I remembered the faces of the boys who sat across me as we ate our cereal. There he was, Naftali Frankel. Except this time, instead of hearing him chatting away with his friends, I was hearing voice recordings of his last conversation. I remember watching the Tzanchanim troops on the news searching for the boys as if they were their own brothers. I remember doing tehillim in the community. I remember campaigns, Bring Back Our Boys, Shvu Achim. I also remember the 30th of June 2014, when the bodies of the 3 boys were found in a field in the northwest of Hebron. I remember seeing the news and running into my room. I buried my head in my pillow and cried uncontrollably. Why? Why? Why?
I also remember making myself a promise. With tears rolling down my cheeks, I made a promise that I would do my best to carry these 3 boys in all the good that I do, and that one day I will actively be part of protecting Am Yisrael. I remember the 26th of August, 2017, proudly standing at Bakum ready to draft into the IDF, into the paratroopers unit. I remember seeing Asaf Yifrach, Eyal's brother, standing next to me, waiting to draft, as his family stood around him in stern support, despite the loss of his older brother. I remember getting posted for active duty in Hebron and driving past the very bus stop where the 3 boys were kidnapped. Except this time, I was not watching CNN. I was there in person, wearing an IDF uniform and on my way to protect Israeli citizens. As I remember these moments, I remember the piercing pain in my heart, but I also remember the immense sense of pride that I felt. Eyal, Gilad, and Naftali may have been brutally murdered, but they died al-Kiddush Hashem. They changed so many lives, and they certainly changed mine. I remember.
Some say time heals everything, but when it comes to war, I think the wounds become more painful with time. I first met you, Guy, when I was still in training. You had already finished your training, and I looked up to you as a role model in the unit. You were a huge soldier that had a reputation as a Special Forces Krav Maga champion. When I got to know you better, I found you to be one of the greatest souls I have ever met. You were a mensch that everyone could rely on no matter what. Then we went to war. We had been in Gaza for about 10 days. My team got a command to go into a greenhouse near an olive grove, and your unit was sent inside a UN clinic about 15 meters away. A few minutes later, there was a big explosion inside your building. I saw the exterior wall collapse, soldiers frantically running around, and lots of screaming. I thought that the clinic had been hit with a missile, but it turned out that there was an explosive device under the floor, which had been detonated remotely. My mind knew that our friends were in that building, but I couldn't comprehend what was happening.
After the explosion, you managed to stand up and help those around you. But then you succumbed to your wounds and died in that clinic, along with Omer Ninyohei and Matan Gottlieb. When we got out of Gaza, you were already buried in the ground. We went to visit your family, but I couldn't look into your grandfather's eyes. He had survived the Holocaust, only to see army officers come to his house and shatter your family's world with the words, "Your son has fallen while fulfilling his duty." That hot summer's day haunts us all. You will never reach your 21st birthday. You will never again say goodnight and I love you to your parents. You'll never play with your sisters. You'll never smile at your girlfriend or know the true love of another. You were planning on traveling, but those flights were never booked. You'll never shake the dean's hand at your graduation. You'll never stand under that chuppah. And you'll never hold your son on your shoulders. For a long time I've asked, why were you taken from us? I don't have any answers, but I just hope that you're resting peacefully with Ninyo, Gottlieb, and my commander, Chagai Ben Ari. Every day that goes by, we miss you, our dear friends. This was an extract written by a soldier from Johannesburg in the Maglan unit.
Pessimism is a luxury a Jew can never allow himself. When Avram the first Jew despaired, the soul of man is the lamp of God. This quote from Mishlei reminds us that man's soul reflects Hashem's light. And in that spirit, these candles remind us of those we have lost. May their memory dispel the darkness and reveal the light.